My boyfriend said, "People only invite you because of me. On your own, you're forgettable." I replied, "Good to know." That week, I stopped going anywhere with him. 3 days later, one of his closest friends pulled him aside, and whatever she whispered made him go completely pale. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 29, and I spent nearly 2 years engaged to a man who slowly taught me to confuse quietness with worthlessness. At the beginning, I never would have described it that way. When I met Tyler Morgan, I was 27 and still young enough to mistake certainty for character. Tyler had that effortless social confidence people admire before they understand the cost of it. He moved through rooms like he belonged in all of them. He knew bartenders by name, remembered birthdays, slipped into conversations with strangers, and walked away with invitations, numbers, and plans for the next weekend. People noticed him. People orbited him. I was different. I've always preferred smaller spaces, quieter conversations, dinners where people actually finish their stories instead of performing them. I'm not shy. I just don't feel the need to fill every silence the second it appears. Tyler used to say that was one of the things he loved about me. I calmed him down. I made everything around him feel less frantic. Back then, I thought that meant we balanced each other. For a while, maybe we did. He pulled me into his social world. I grounded him when he got overstimulated or restless or started chasing attention the way some people chase caffeine. It felt complimentary. He gave me movement. I gave him steadiness. 18 months later, we got engaged. If you had asked me then, I would have told you we were solid. Looking back, the cracks were already there. I just kept mistaking them for differences in personality instead of warnings. At first, Tyler's comments came disguised as jokes. "Thank God I got you out tonight," he'd say with his arm around my waist at some rooftop party full of expensive shoes and louder voices. "Otherwise, you'd still be home pretending you don't see anyone's texts." Or, "People wouldn't even know you exist if I didn't drag you into civilization." Everyone laughed. Sometimes I did too. That was part of what made it work. The comments were small enough to swallow, polished enough to pass as teasing, private enough in tone that objecting to them made me feel oversensitive. He never started with anything cruel enough to defend yourself against. He started with things that sounded harmless until they became a pattern. Then the jokes became explanations. Then the explanations became judgments. About 4 months before everything ended, we were getting ready for one of his coworkers' birthday parties when he leaned against the bedroom doorframe, adjusted his watch, and said, "Try to talk more tonight, okay?" I glanced at him in the mirror. I talk. You know what I mean. I did. He stepped farther into the room, lowering his voice into that patient, managerial tone I had started to hate without fully admitting it. "Just make more of an effort. I don't want people thinking I brought dead weight." I turned around. "Dead weight?" He laughed lightly, like the phrase itself was harmless. "Not literally. I'm saying you spend half the night standing there with one drink, looking like you want to leave. People notice. Then don't bring me." He paused, then gave me that familiar smile that managed to feel affectionate and corrective at the same time. "I can't show up alone to everything, Naomi. That looks worse." Worse. I remember that word because it stayed with me through the whole party. And I tried. I spoke to his coworkers, asked follow-up questions, smiled when appropriate, laughed when I was supposed to. I moved through the room like someone trying to pass a test no one would explain out loud. Every time I looked at Tyler, I could feel him assessing me. Not whether I was okay, whether I was performing well enough. I told myself I was imagining that. I told myself a lot of things back then. The real breaking point came 2 weeks before I stopped going anywhere with him. We were invited to a dinner hosted by one of his closest friends, Rebecca, at the kind of restaurant designed for people who enjoy being seen inside it. 8 couples, soft lighting, expensive wine, everyone polished, loud, and slightly too aware of their own stories. The conversation moved in loops I had no real interest in joining. Promotions, networking gossip, a villa in Tulum, a last-minute trip to Mykonos, someone's funding round, someone else's absurdly specific fitness routine. I wasn't uncomfortable. I just didn't have anything honest to add, and I've never been the kind of person who speaks just to prove I can. Tyler kept glancing at me across the table. Not enough to draw attention, just enough for me to feel it, a look that said, "Help me." Then, Why are you being like this? Then, you're making this harder for me. By the time we got back to the car, I already knew what was coming. He waited until we were pulling into our apartment complex before he said anything. Then he exhaled sharply and tightened his grip on the steering wheel. That was painful. I stared out the windshield. What was? Come on, Naomi. I turned to look at him. No, say it clearly. He laughed once under his breath, irritated. You barely said 10 words all night. I didn't have anything to contribute to a competition about who's the most exhausted from luxury travel. That's exactly the problem. He finally looked at me. You never do. There it was again. Not a complaint about one dinner, a conclusion about me as a person. I felt something inside me go very still. How does me being quiet make you look bad? He parked, sat in silence for one beat, then turned fully toward me. Because people only invite you because of me, he said. They don't actually want you there. They tolerate you because you're with me. I didn't answer. Maybe if he had stopped there, I would have cried. Maybe I would have fought. Maybe I would have defended myself and given him a chance to walk it back. But Tyler always had a talent for going one step farther than necessary, especially when he thought honesty made cruelty sound respectable. On your own, he said, almost casually. You're forgettable. Forgettable. The word landed harder because he said it like a fact, not an insult. Like he was naming something obvious I simply hadn't been mature enough to accept. I looked at him for a long moment and realized two things at once. First, he meant it, or wanted me to believe he did. Second, some part of me already had. That was the part that hurt most. Not just that the man I loved had reduced me to background noise in one sentence, but that he had been building toward that sentence for months, and I had let him. A joke here, a correction there, a little social coaching dressed up as concern. 1,000 tiny edits to the way I saw myself until his voice started sounding more authoritative than my own. Good to know, I said. His expression shifted, almost annoyed that I wasn't reacting the way he expected. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm being realistic. You need to hear this. I opened the car door. Naomi, if that's the truth, I said quietly, then I'm glad you said it. He followed me upstairs, still talking. Social strategies, effort, presence, energy, the kind of language he always used when he wanted to turn my pain into a self-improvement project. I nodded in the right places, changed into sleep clothes, washed my face, got into bed, and stared at the ceiling long after he fell asleep. I kept hearing it. Forgettable. I thought about every event I had gone to because he wanted me there. Every conversation I had, second-guessed afterward. Every time I'd wondered whether I was too quiet, too plain, too forgettable to take up real space in anyone else's life. I thought about how easily he had said it, how natural it had sounded in his mouth, and sometime around 2 a.m, the humiliation hardened into something cleaner. Curiosity. If people only invited me because of Tyler, then removing myself should make no difference at all. No questions. No one noticing. No missing person-shaped space at any table. That was the theory, wasn't it? So the next morning, while he stood in the kitchen scrolling through weekend plans and half listening to a voice note, I made coffee and made a decision. I wasn't going to argue with what he said. I was going to test it. That week, Tyler had 3 social plans lined up. Wednesday drinks with his work friends, Friday dinner at Rebecca's again, and Saturday brunch with his college circle, the group he talked about like they were a second family. Usually, I would have gone to all 3. This time, I was going to stay home, and by the end of the week, one of us was going to find out whether I had ever really been forgettable at all. The first test came sooner than I expected. Wednesday afternoon, Tyler leaned against the kitchen counter, glanced up from his phone, and asked, like nothing had changed, "What time are you getting ready?" I didn't even look up from my laptop. "I'm not going tonight." Silence. The kind that doesn't settle. The kind that tightens. "What?" he said, like he had misheard me. "I'm staying home." He straightened a little, confusion flashing across his face before irritation took its place. Why? I closed my laptop slowly, buying myself a second, then met his eyes. "You said people only invite me because of you, so I'm testing that," he blinked. "Naomi, I didn't mean—" "No," I cut in gently. "You did, and you were probably right. So you should go. Have fun. I won't be there dragging down the room." His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. Or I'm being forgettable somewhere it won't embarrass you. That landed. I saw it in the way his expression shifted. Not guilt, not yet. Discomfort, like something had moved slightly out of his control. He grabbed his keys a little too hard. Fine, stay home if you want. I do. He hesitated for half a second, like he expected me to backtrack. I didn't. So he left. The apartment felt different the moment the door closed. Quieter, obviously, but also clearer. No background tension, no subtle expectation that I needed to perform even in my own home. I made dinner for myself, something simple, and ate it at the table instead of hovering over a kitchen counter between conversations that never meant anything. I read. I worked on a project I had been putting off. I noticed how easy it was to breathe when I wasn't being observed. That surprised me more than anything. Tyler came home around 11. I heard the door open, the familiar rhythm of his steps, the slight pause like he was deciding how to enter the room. He walked into the living room, glanced at me on the couch, then dropped his keys. You stayed in all night? He asked. Yes. That's... He trailed off. That's kind of sad. I smiled faintly. Or peaceful. He didn't respond. He just shrugged off his jacket and went to the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets without really looking for anything. I waited for him to bring it up again. He didn't. That almost mattered more than if he had. Friday was different. By then, something had already shifted. Not dramatically, but enough that I could feel it. Are you coming to Rebecca's tonight? He asked, standing in the bedroom doorway while I was getting dressed. No. He exhaled sharply. Naomi. You said people tolerate me because of you, I reminded him, calmly pulling a sweater over my head. I don't want to be tolerated. That's not what It is, I said, turning to face him, and I believe you. That stopped him again, because arguing with me meant arguing against his own words. He rubbed a hand over his face. People are going to ask where you are. Tell them I'm being forgettable somewhere else. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he just said, "This is ridiculous," and left. He came back later than Wednesday, close to midnight. I was in the living room again. Same spot, different book. When he walked in, his energy felt off. Not angry, not relaxed either. Something in between. Rebecca asked about you, he said, dropping into the armchair across from me. I marked my page. What did you tell her? That you weren't feeling well. I raised an eyebrow. Why lie? He scoffed. Because I can't exactly say my girlfriend is staging some kind of protest over a comment. This isn't a protest. Then what is it? I met his eyes. This is me respecting your assessment of my social value. The words landed heavier this time. He leaned back and exhaled through his nose. You're twisting what I said. I'm using it. Silence stretched between us. For a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt, maybe, or the first hint that the version of reality he had been presenting might not hold up without me quietly supporting it. But he pushed it down. He always did. Whatever, he muttered, standing up. Do what you want. I am. Saturday morning felt different from the start. He was already tense when he woke up. I could tell by the way he moved, sharper and quicker, like everything required slightly more effort than usual. The brunch with his college friends wasn't just another event. It was the one that mattered. The group he saw the most. The group he talked about like they knew him best. Get ready, he said, standing at the edge of the bed. We're leaving in an hour. I didn't move. I'm not coming. He laughed once, short and disbelieving. Naomi, enough. This has gone on long enough. Has it? Yes. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration finally spilling over. People are asking questions. What questions? About you. About us. About why you're suddenly not around. I sat up slowly, studying him. And what are you telling them? That you're busy. That work is crazy. That you'll be back next week. I nodded. You could tell them the truth. He stared at me. And what's that? That I'm forgettable, and people only invite me because of you. His expression cracked, just slightly, but enough. I never should have said that, he admitted, the words coming out tighter than expected. But you did, I said. and now I want to know if it's true." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he grabbed his jacket. "Fine," he said. "Stay." The door closed harder than necessary behind him. I spent the afternoon the same way I had the rest of the week, quiet, intentional, present in my own life instead of performing in someone else's. I made lunch, answered emails, took a walk. Not once did I check my phone to see if anyone had noticed I wasn't there, because that was the point. If Tyler was right, no one would. If he wasn't, I didn't let myself finish that thought. He came home at exactly 4, earlier than I expected. The door opened slowly this time, no energy behind it, no momentum. I looked up from the kitchen table as he stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed wasn't what he said. It was how he looked, pale, not tired, not irritated, shaken. He didn't say anything. He just walked straight past me, down the hallway, and into the bedroom. The door stayed slightly open behind him. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, an hour. Long enough for the silence to feel deliberate. Finally, I got up and walked down the hall. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was trying to piece something together that no longer fit. "Tyler," I said quietly, "what happened?" He didn't answer. I stepped closer. "You look like something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," he said automatically. It was the least convincing thing I had ever heard. I crossed my arms and leaned against the door frame. "Then why do you look like someone just told you a secret you can't unhear?" That got his attention. He looked up at me then, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something I had never associated with Tyler Morgan. Uncertainty. Real, unfiltered uncertainty. "Lena pulled me aside after brunch," he said finally, voice quieter than usual. I frowned slightly. "Lena?" "One of my friends. You've met her." I nodded. "What did she say?" He swallowed, and for a second I could see him deciding how much of the truth he was willing to give me. "First, she asked why you haven't been coming to anything," he said. "That's not surprising. I told her you were busy, work stuff." "And?" He let out a slow breath. "She said that was fine." A pause, then softer. "And then she said people have been asking about you." I felt something shift in my chest. "About why I'm not there?" He shook his head. "No," he said. "About you. They miss you." The words didn't land all at once. They settled slowly, like something my mind didn't want to accept too quickly in case it turned out to be another distortion. I watched Tyler carefully. Not the words, him. The way his shoulders stayed tense. The way his hands remained clasped together like he needed to hold something in place. The way he couldn't quite meet my eyes for more than a second at a time. "What exactly did she say?" I asked. He let out a quiet breath, like repeating it would make it more real. "She said people have been asking where you are. Not casually, specifically. She said they miss talking to you." I sat down across from him on the bed. "Talking to me?" He nodded once. "Apparently, you're one of the only people there who actually listens when someone's speaking, who remembers things they said weeks ago, who asks follow-up questions that aren't just filler." There was something bitter in the way he said that last word. "And she asked," he continued, voice lower now, "if I'd said something that made you feel like you didn't belong." The room went very still. "What did you tell her?" I asked quietly. "I said you were stressed, busy, that it wasn't a big deal." "Did she believe you?" He gave a humorless laugh. "No." I didn't respond right away, because something inside me was rearranging itself. All those nights I thought I wasn't contributing enough. All those moments I second-guessed whether I was too quiet, too invisible, too forgettable. "They miss you," I repeated, softer this time. Tyler ran a hand over his face. "That's not even the worst part." I looked up. "There's more?" He hesitated, and for the first time, I realized he wasn't deciding how to soften something. He was deciding how much damage he was willing to admit. "Lena said people have been complaining." "About what?" "About me." That I hadn't expected. I didn't say anything. I just waited. They said I dominate conversations, that I turn everything back to myself, that I don't actually listen, I just wait for my turn to speak. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. And apparently no one says it to my face because dealing with me when I'm defensive is exhausting. The words hung there, heavy. And me? I asked. Where do I fit into that? He finally looked at me then, really looked. You balance it out, he said quietly. That's what she said. That when you're there, things feel easier. People feel heard. Conversations don't turn into competitions. A strange, almost painful warmth spread through my chest. Not pride. Relief. Like I had been holding my breath for 2 years without realizing it. And when I'm not there, his expression tightened. It's noticeable. How? He hesitated again. Because without you, I'm a lot. I held his gaze. That's what they said? That's what she said they've been saying for months. Months. So while I had been shrinking myself, trying to take up less space, trying to be less of a burden, no one had actually wanted me smaller. They had wanted him quieter. I let that sink in. Then I asked the question that mattered more than any of it. So, when you said people only invite me because of you, his eyes dropped. I was wrong. Completely? He nodded almost immediately. Completely. Silence settled between us again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This one felt like the aftermath of something breaking. Not loudly, but irreversibly. The next few days didn't explode into arguments. They stretched instead. Tense, careful, quiet in a different way. Tyler tried to act normal, but there was something underneath everything now, a fracture he couldn't smooth over with charm or confidence. When Wednesday came around again, he stood by the door with his keys in his hand and asked, "Do you want to come with me tonight?" The question sounded different this time, less expectation, more uncertainty. I looked up from my phone. No. He nodded slowly, like he had expected that. Okay. No argument. No pushback. Just acceptance. That almost felt worse. He came back earlier than usual. They asked about you, he said the moment he walked in. Who? Kelly. A couple others. What did they say? He set his keys down more carefully this time. Kelly said she misses your conversations. I frowned. What conversations? That's exactly what I asked. He let out a small, incredulous breath. She said you two had been talking about books. Sci-fi stuff, recommendations. Apparently she's been waiting to tell you about something she read. I blinked. I don't remember that. He looked at me like that was the point. That's because you don't realize when you're connecting with people, he said. You think you're just being polite, but you're not. There was no accusation in his voice this time, just something quieter, something that almost sounded like understanding. I always thought you were holding back, he added, like you weren't trying hard enough. And now? He shook his head. Now I think I was too busy performing to notice what you were actually doing. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message, not from Tyler, from Rebecca. Hey, I know Tyler said you've been busy, but we're doing a smaller dinner next week. Would really love if you came. No pressure. You're missed. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned the phone and showed Tyler. He read it once, then again, slower the second time. You should go, he said quietly. Without you? They invited you, not us. The distinction hung there, sharp and unavoidable. I studied his face. What does that mean for us? That question seemed to land harder than anything else had. He sat down slowly, shoulders slumping in a way I had never seen before. I think it means I spent 2 years telling you that you only mattered because of me. His voice dropped. When the truth is, I might only have been tolerable because of you. I didn't answer, because for the first time since all of this started, I didn't know what the right response was. Later that night, he came to me with his phone in his hand. Lena sent me something, he said. About what? About everything. He hesitated, then held the phone out. Do you want to read it? I took it, and as my eyes moved over the message, I felt something inside me go very quiet. Lena didn't soften anything. She didn't try to protect him. She didn't try to protect me either. She just told the truth. Months of observations. How Tyler talked over people, how he redirected conversations back to himself, how he dismissed other people's stories as less interesting. And then the line that made everything click into place. The only time you're actually bearable is when Naomi's there. She makes you listen. Without her, you're exhausting. I lowered the phone slowly. The room felt heavier now. Clearer, too. Tyler watched me, waiting. For judgment. For anger. For something. I handed the phone back. That's harsh. He gave a small, tired nod. It's honest. A pause. And I've been doing the same thing to you. I looked at him. Telling you you're forgettable, he continued, voice unsteady now, when really, I was just afraid people might like you more than me. That was it. Not confidence, not truth, fear. Every comment, every correction, every time he had made me feel smaller. It wasn't because I was. It was because he needed me to be. After that night, nothing exploded. No screaming matches. No dramatic ultimatums. No clean break. Just a slow, quiet shift that made everything feel different. Like we were still living in the same apartment, still sharing the same routines, but the meaning underneath all of it had changed. Tyler started therapy the following week. He didn't announce it like some grand gesture. He just mentioned it one morning over coffee, eyes fixed on his mug instead of me. I scheduled a session, he said. I think I need to figure out why I do that. Do what? I asked, even though I already knew. He exhaled. Make everything about me. Tear people down. I nodded. Okay. I went to Rebecca's dinner alone. I almost didn't, not because I was nervous about them, but because I didn't know who I was supposed to be in that room without Tyler beside me. For 2 years, I had been Tyler's fiancé first, Naomi second. Every introduction, every conversation, every dynamic had started there. Walking into that restaurant alone felt like stepping into a version of myself I hadn't fully met yet. Rebecca spotted me first. Her face lit up in a way that was immediate and genuine. Naomi, she said, standing up to hug me. I'm so glad you came. That shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but it did. The rest of the table reacted the same way. Not curiosity, not awkwardness, relief. Where have you been? Someone asked with a half laugh. We thought you disappeared. I've just been busy, I said automatically. It was the same line Tyler had been using, except now I could hear how thin it sounded. Dinner moved easily, too easily. That was the part that unsettled me. No pressure to perform, no subtle glances telling me to speak more or differently, no sense that I needed to keep up with anyone. Conversations flowed around me, and when I spoke, people listened. When they spoke, I listened. It felt natural. At one point, Kelly leaned toward me, eyes bright. I've been waiting to tell you about this book, she said. It's exactly the kind of sci-fi we were talking about. I smiled, surprised. You remembered that? Of course. You're the only one who actually lets me finish explaining why I like something. That hit harder than it should have, because in that moment, I realized all the things I thought were invisible weren't. Tyler asked how it went the second I got home. He was sitting on the couch, leaning forward slightly, like he'd been waiting. It was good, I said, setting my bag down. Good how? I considered the question. Easy. That seemed to land. Easy. No pressure, no performing. He nodded slowly, eyes dropping for a second. Yeah, that makes sense. Over the next few weeks, the shift continued. Not dramatically, but consistently. I started getting more messages. Kelly texting me about books, Rebecca inviting me to smaller dinners, one of Tyler's coworkers asking if I wanted to join a game night. Not group invites, direct ones. Me. Tyler noticed. Of course he did. At first, he tried to act like it didn't bother him, like it was a natural extension of what had always been there, but the cracks were harder to hide now. One night, after I told him about another invitation, he leaned back against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. They're really reaching out a lot. They are. More than before. I met his eyes. Maybe they always wanted to. That wasn't an accusation, but it still felt like one. He looked away first. Therapy seemed to make him more aware. He caught himself more, interrupted himself less, listened longer before responding. It was noticeable. But so was something else. The way he watched me now, like he was trying to understand something he had missed for a long time. One evening, while I was getting ready for another small gathering, this time one I had been invited to first, he stood in the doorway and said, "I always thought you weren't trying." I glanced at him through the mirror. Trying what? To connect. To be interesting. I turned to face him. And now? He hesitated. Now I think I just didn't understand what that looks like when it's not loud. That was the clearest he had been. But clarity doesn't repair damage. It just shows you where it is. We tried for 3 more months. 3 months of careful conversations, of him trying to change, of me trying to believe that change could matter enough, of both of us pretending awareness might undo what had already been done. It couldn't, because the problem wasn't just what he said that night. It was that, somewhere along the way, I had believed him. I had let his version of me replace my own. Even as he tried to take the word back, I couldn't unhear it. Forgettable. The end didn't come from a fight. It came from a realization. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch one night, the TV on, but neither of us really watching it, when I said, "I don't think we can fix this." He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. "Because of what I said?" he asked quietly. "Because of what it meant," I replied. He nodded slowly. "That I didn't really see you. That you made me feel like I didn't exist unless it was through you." Silence. Then, "I'm trying to change that." "I know. And it's not enough." I didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. It wasn't. We called off the engagement 2 weeks later. No big announcement, no dramatic fallout, just a quiet ending to something that had been breaking for a long time. He moved out first. Then, about a month later, he moved to a different city for a fresh start. The strange part came after. I kept getting invited. Rebecca's dinners, Kelly's book club, game nights, smaller gatherings that felt more real than the old ones ever had. And every time I walked into a room, I paid attention. Not to prove anything, just to notice. People greeted me, remembered things I'd said, picked up conversations where we'd left off weeks earlier. No one looked past me. No one treated me like I was only there because of someone else. Slowly, something settled into place. Tyler had been wrong. Completely. But I had been wrong too. Not about who I was. About believing someone else got to define it. Months later, through Rebecca, I heard that Tyler had moved again. This time for a new job and another attempt at starting over. I just nodded when she told me. "Good for him," I said. And I meant it. Not in a forced, polite way. In the quiet, distant way you mean things when something has fully ended. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and thought about the version of me from a few months earlier, the one sitting in that car, hearing the word forgettable and letting it take root, the one who didn't argue, didn't defend herself, just absorbed it because she trusted the person saying it. That was the part that mattered most, not the word itself, the source. Trust breaks quietly, not in one moment, but in small shifts, a joke that lingers too long, a comment that feels slightly off, a pattern you explain away because confronting it would mean admitting something you're not ready to see. I didn't leave Tyler because he said one cruel thing. I left because that sentence revealed something that had been building for 2 years, a belief that one person gets to define the other, that confidence comes from comparison, that being loved means being shaped into something more acceptable. And I had agreed to that without realizing it. The truth was simpler than he ever understood. Tyler thought people stayed because someone was entertaining, magnetic, memorable in the loudest possible sense of the word. But that isn't what people remember. They remember how they felt around you, whether they were heard, whether they mattered, whether they could exist without competing. That was the shift, not in how people saw me, in how I finally saw myself. I'm still not loud. I still don't dominate rooms. I still prefer conversations to performances. But now, when I walk into a space, I don't wonder if I belong there. I don't measure my presence against someone else's. I don't wait for permission to exist. I just do. And that isn't forgettable. It's just a quieter kind of presence, a real one. Because in the end, Tyler was wrong about me, and I was wrong to believe him.